Hi there, this is Kina Bhattacharjee, and you're joining me with Sue. And those of you in the UK will know her from the Sooty Show, and those of you who are worldwide, this is Sue. She's a panda, and she's going to help me tell you guys a story today. We'll be reading from Roald Dahl's Fantastic Mr. Fox. Now, you may already have read it, you might have seen a movie about it as well, but it's quite a nice story. It's one of my favourites. Roald Dahl is one of my favourite children's authors anyway. So we're going to be reading from this today. And for the interest for any mums and dads who are watching as well, what I'll be doing is I'll be splitting the video into two parts so that it's easier to concentrate for everyone. We don't want to reduce boredom and tedium and that sort of thing. And also for the purposes of YouTube, they like shorter videos. So here we go. So with reading, I've tried to keep, this book has 18 chapters. And I'm going to split it, the first part into 9 chapters and the second part with 9 chapters as well. All right, so I hope that's all right with everyone. And let's read this story, shall we? So, this is Fantastic Mr. Fox, and as we can see, we have several characters. We've got Mr. Fox, who's our main hero, Mrs. Fox, the small foxes of children, and then we have the 3 farmers who are going to be the baddies, what I remember. They're Badger, Boggis, Bean and Bunce. So let's get started then, shall we? And Sue will help me from time to time to turn the pages and just basically be a good girl. Won't you, Sue? Yes, she will. So here we go. And if she isn't, tell me. All right? So let's start. Here we are, chapter 1, The 3 Farmers. Down in the valley, there were 3 farms. The owner of these farms had done well. They were rich men. They were also nasty men. All 3 of them were about as nasty and mean as any men you could meet. That's familiar, ladies. What are you laughing at? Their names were Farmer Boggis, Farmer Bunce, and Farmer Bean. Right? Oh, you want to show the pictures? Okay, here you go. Here's the pictures. Right. We're going to show you the picture. We're going to be here all night, Sue. I know you like the pictures. She likes the pictures. Right. Boggis was a chicken farmer. He kept thousands of chickens. He was enormously fat. This was because he ate 3 boiled chickens smothered with dumplings every day for breakfast. Imagine that. He had them every day for breakfast, lunch and supper. Bunce, the second farmer, was a duck and goose farmer. He kept thousands of ducks and geese. He was a kind of pot-bellied dwarf. He was so short, his chin would have been underwater in the shallow end of any swimming pool in the world. Imagine that. Sue's really surprised. That's a surprised look. And she's dismayed. He was so short, his chin would have been underwater in the shallow end of any swimming pool. His food was donuts and goose livers. He mashed the livers into disgusting paste and then stuffed the paste into the donuts. Ugh. This diet gave him a tummy ache and a beastly temper. I'd imagine so. Here you go. Here's Farmer Bunce stuffing himself with his donut dumpling things. It's awful. Not nice at all. No, for someone who eats bamboo leaves. Yes, she likes the bamboo leaves. She's a panda. Thank you. Bean, the 3rd farmer, was a turkey and apple farmer. He kept thousands of turkeys in an orchard full of apple trees. He never ate any food at all. Instead, he drank gallons of strong cider, which he made from the apples in his orchard. Ooh. He was as thin as a pencil and the cleverest of them all. Wow, doesn't sound good, does it? No, doesn't. Here you go. He is literally thin as a pencil. What's his name? Bean. Right. You would have thought he would look like a bean, but he doesn't. So here's a rhyme now. Boggis and Bunce and Bean, one fat, one short, one lean. These horrible crooks, so different in looks, were nonetheless equally mean. It's a nice limerick, isn't it? Good old Roald Dahl with his limericks. I love them. This is what the children round about used to sing when they saw them. Oh dear, oh dear. So, here's Mr. Fox now, our main man. Fox, should I say. On a hill above the valley there was a wood. In the wood there was a huge tree. Under the tree there was a hole. In the hole lived Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox and their 4 small foxes. Ah. Have you seen any foxes in your garden? Let me know if you have. This is a particularly London, UK problem. So let me know in the comments if you've seen any foxes. Every evening, as soon as it got dark, Mr. Fox would say to Mrs. Fox, "Well, my darling, what shall it be this time? A plump chicken from Boggis, a duck or a goose from Bunce, or a nice turkey from Bean?" And when Mrs. Fox had told him what she wanted, Mr. Fox would creep down into the valley in the darkness of the night and help himself. So he wasn't exactly a good character, is it? I mean, you're going to steal something. That's not a good thing now, is it? We know that it isn't. But then again, that's how he eats food, him and his family. Otherwise, how would they survive? Who's lost in thought? Okay. Boggis and Bunce and Bean knew very well what was going on, and it made them wild with rage. They were not men who liked to give anything away. Less still did they like anything to be stolen from them. So every night each of them would take a shotgun and hide in a dark place, somewhere on his own farm, hoping to catch the robber. So they thought that a human was actually stealing their produce. But it wasn't. We know it's Mr. Fox. But Mr. Fox was too clever for them. He always approached the farm with the wind blowing in his face, and this meant that if any man were lurking in the shadows ahead, the wind would carry the smell of that man to Mr. Fox's nose far, far away. So if Mr. Boggis was hiding behind his chicken house number 1, Mr. Fox would smell him out from 50 yards off and quickly changed direction, heading for chicken house number 4 at the end of the other end of the farm. That's quite clever, isn't it? To be able to smell out humans. "Dang and blast the lousy beast," cried Boggis. "I'd like to rip his guts out," said Bunce. Oh, is that too scary for you? Oh, well, they are mean people. We were warned. "He must be killed," cried Bean. "But how?" said Boggis. "How on earth can we catch the blighter?" Bean picked his nose delicately with a long finger. Ew, so gross. How many of you boys and girls pick your nose? It's not in public, privately. Let me know. Not that it's a good thing, but still. "I have a plan," he said. "You've never had a decent plan yet," said Bunce. "Shut up and listen," said Bean. "Tomorrow night we will all hide just outside the hole where the fox lives. We will wait there until he comes out. Then, bang, 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 bang." "Very clever," said Bunce. "But first we shall have to find the hole." "My dear Bunce, I've already found it," said the crafty Bean. "It's up in the wood on the hill. It's under a huge tree." Oh no, that means they found out where Mr. Fox and his family lives. What will happen next? Chapter 3, The Shooting. "Well, my darling," said Mr. Fox, "what shall it be tonight?" "I think we'll have duck tonight," says Mrs. Fox. "Bring us 2 fat ducks, if you please." Ducks it shall be, said Mr. Fox. Bunce is the best. Now do be careful, said Mrs. Fox. My darling, said Mr. Fox, I can smell those goons a mile away. I can even smell one from the other. Boggis gives off a filthy stink of rotten chicken skins. Bunce reeks of goose livers, and as for Bean, the fumes of apple cider hang around him like poisonous gases. Ugh, that does not sound good at all. Wouldn't want to be around them, would we? Would we, Sue? No. Yes, but just don't get careless, said Mrs. Fox. You know they'll be waiting for you, all three of them. Don't worry about me, said Mr. Fox. I'll see you later. But Mr. Fox wouldn't have been quite so cocky had he known exactly where the farmers were waiting at that moment. They were just outside the entrance to the hole, each one crouching behind a tree with his gun loaded. And what's more, they had chosen their positions very carefully, making sure that the wind was not blowing from them towards the fox's hole. In fact, it was blowing in the opposite direction. There was no chance of them being smelled out. So not only had they found the hole and positioned themselves, but they made sure that the wind doesn't carry off the odour to Mr. Fox's nose. It's clever, isn't it? Mr. Fox crept up the dark tunnel to the mouth of his hole. He poked his long, handsome face out into the night air and sniffed once. He moved an inch or two forward, stopped. He sniffed again. He was always especially careful when coming out from his hole. He inched forward a little more. The front of his body was now in the open. His black nose twitched from side to side, sniffing and sniffing for the scent of danger. Oh, thank you, Sue. Ah, thank you. Give a kiss to the audience. Thank you. No, she's shy now. She's shy. We'll have to see if we can get a kiss from her later on, yeah? We'll have to see. If you be kind, if you be good, we will. We will, won't we? She's shy again. Oh dear. All right, come on. Let's go back to the story. He found none, and he was just about to go trotting forward into the wood when he heard or thought he heard a tiny noise, a soft rustling sound, as though someone had moved a foot over, ever so gently, to a patch of dry leaves. Did he hear them? Did he hear the farmers? Mr. Fox flattened his body against the ground and lay very still, his ears pricked. He waited a long time, but he heard nothing more. It must have been a field mouse, he told himself, or some other small animal. But was it, though? Was it a field mouse? He crept a little further out of the hole, and then further still. He was almost right out in the open now. He took a last careful look around. The wood was murky and very still. Somewhere in the sky the moon was shining. Just then his sharp night eyes caught a glint of something bright behind a tree not far away. It was a small silver speck of moonlight, shining on a polished surface. He lay still, watching it. What on earth was it? Now it was moving. It was coming up and up. Great heavens, it was the barrel of a gun. Quick as a whip, Mr. Fox jumped back into his hole, and at that same instant the entire wood seemed to explode around him. He saw the farmers saw him, and what happened then? Bang, 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 bang. No, it was the guns. The smoke from the 3 guns floated upward in the night air. Boggis, Bunce and Bean came out from behind the trees and walked towards the hole. Did we get him? Said Bean. One of them shone a flashlight on the hole, and there on the ground, in the circle of light, half in, half out the hole, lay the poor, tattered, blood-stained remains of a fox's tail. Oh no. So they didn't get Mr. Fox, but they got his tail. Oh dear. Look, here's a picture. You can see it. The tail. Farmer holding a tail. Which one is that? Bean Bean picked it up. "We got the tail, but we missed the fox," he said, tossing the thing away. Oh dear. Fox without his tail. Not nice, is it? "Dang and blast," said Boggis. "We shot too late. We should have let fly the moment he poked his head out." "He wouldn't be poking out again in a hurry," Bunce said. Bean pulled a flush from his pocket and took a swig of cider. Then he said, "It'll take 3 days at least before he gets hungry enough to come out again. I'm not sitting around here waiting for that. Let's dig him out." "Ah," said Boggis, "now you're talking sense. We can dig him in a couple of hours. We know he's there." "I reckon there's a whole family of them down that hole," Bunce said. "Then we'll have the lot," said Bean. "Get the shovels." Oh no, so they're going to dig the hole out. What's going to happen now? Chapter 4, The Terrible Shovels. Down in the hole, Mrs. Fox was tenderly licking the stump of Mr. Fox's tail to stop the bleeding. "It was the finest tail for miles around," she said between licks. "It hurts," said Mr. Fox. "I know it does, sweetheart, but it'll soon get better." "And it'll soon grow again, Dad," said one of the small foxes. "It'll never grow again," said Mr. Fox. "I shall be tailless for the rest of my life." Oh dear, he looked very glum. Oh, poor Mr. Fox. There was no food for the foxes that night, and soon the children dozed off. Then Mrs. Fox dozed off, but Mr. Fox couldn't sleep because of the pain in the stump of his tail. Oh, poor thing. I suppose they couldn't take paracetamol or anything like that, could they? No. "Well," he thought, "I suppose I'm lucky to be alive at all. And now they've found our hole, we're going to have to move out as soon as possible. We'll never get any peace if we—" What was that? He turned his head sharply and listened. The noise he heard now was the most frightening noise a fox can ever hear. The scrape, scrape, scraping of shovels digging into the soil. Oh. "Wake up," he shouted. "They're digging us out." Mrs. Fox was wide awake in 1 second. She sat up, quivering all over. "Are you sure that's it?" she whispered. "I'm positive. Listen." "They'll kill my children," cried Mrs. Fox. "Never," said Mr. Fox. "But, darling, they will," sobbed Mrs. Fox. "You know they will." Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch went the shovels above their heads. Small stones and bits of earth began falling from the roof of the tunnel. "How will they kill us, Mummy?" asked one of the small foxes. His round black eyes were huge with fright. A bit like yours now, Sim, isn't it? Huge with fright. No, she doesn't like it. She doesn't like it. Oh, it's all right, Sim. It's just a story. It's all right. It's all right. Will there be dogs?" he said. Mrs. Fox began to cry. She gathered her 4 children close to her and held them tight. Suddenly there was an especially loud crunch above their heads, and the sharp end of a shovel came right through the ceiling. The sight of this awful thing seemed to have an electric effect upon Mr. Fox. He jumped up and shouted, "I've got it! Come on! There's not a moment to lose. Why didn't I think of it before?" "Think of what, Dad?" "A fox can dig quicker than a man," shouted Mr. Fox, beginning to dig. "Nobody in the world can dig quicker as a fox." Didn't know that. Did you? The soil began to fly out furiously behind Mr. Fox as he started to dig for dear life with his front feet. Mrs. Fox ran forward to help him. So did the 4 children. "Go downwards," ordered Mr. Fox. "We've got to go deep as we possibly can." The tunnel began to grow longer and longer. It sloped steeply downward, deeper and deeper below the surface of the ground it went. The mother and the father and all 4 of the children were digging together. The front legs were moving so fast you couldn't see them. And gradually the scrunching and scraping of the shovels became fainter and fainter. After about an hour, Mr. Fox stopped digging. "Hold it," he said. They all stopped. They turned and looked back up the long tunnel they had just dug. All was quiet. "Phew," said Mr. Fox. "I think we've done it. They'll never get as deep as this. Well done, everyone." "Yay!" We're digging a tunnel and escaping. They all sat down, panting for breath. And thank you, Sue, Mrs. Fox said to her children, I should like you to know that if it wasn't for your father, we should all be dead by now. Your father is a fantastic fox. Mr. Fox looked at his wife and she smiled. He loved her more than ever when she said things like that. Ah, that's something familiar, mums and dads. Chapter 5. The Terrible Tractors. As the sun rose the next morning, Boggis, Bunce and Bean were still digging. They had dug a hole so deep you could have put a house into it. Wow! But they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. They were all very tired and cross. Well, that's understandable, isn't it? Oh, thank you, Sue. Dang and blast, said Boggis. What rotten idea was this? Bean's idea, said Bunce. Boggis and Bunce both stared at Bean. Bean took another swig of cider, then put the flask back into his pocket without offering it to the others. It's not nice, is it? Listen, he said angrily, I want that fox. I'm going to get that fox. I'm not giving in till I've strung him up over my front porch, dead as a dumpling. We can't get in by digging, that's for sure, said the fat Boggis. I've had enough of digging. Bunce, the little pot-bellied dwarf, looked up at Bean and said, Have you got any more stupid ideas, then? Well, said Bean, I can't hear you. Bean never took a bath. Ugh. He never even washed. Ugh, goodness, that's awful. That is absolutely terrible, isn't it, Sue? No. It's not good at all. As a result, his ear holes were clogged with all kinds of muck and wax, and bits of chewing gum, and dead flies and stuff like that. That is just terrible. Yuck! Yuck! This made him deaf. Speak louder, he said to Bunce, and Bunce shouted back, Got any more stupid ideas? Bean rubbed the back of his neck with a dirty finger. So gross. He had a boil coming there, and it itched. What we need on this job, he said, is machines. Mechanical shovels. We'll have him out in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels. Oh dear. This was a pretty good idea, and the other two had to admit it. All right then, Bean said, taking charge. Boggis, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bunce and I will go and fetch our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick. The long, thin Bean walked away. The tiny Bunce trotted after him. The fat Boggis stayed where he was with his gun, pointing at the foxhole. Look, so this is a picture of, you help me, Sue. This is a picture of Bean with his filthy Bean. Disgusting, isn't it? Oh. Soon, 2 enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their front ends came clanking into the wood. Bean was driving one, Bunce was driving the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking monsters. Here's a picture. You can show it. There it is over here. Mechanical shovels. Here we go then, shouted Bean. Death to the fox, shouted Bunce. The machines went to work, biting huge mouthfuls of soil out of the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug his hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. On all sides, rocks were sent flying and trees were falling. Then the noise was deafening. Down in the tunnel, the foxes crouched, listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. What's happening, Dad? Cried the small foxes. What are they doing? Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening or what they were doing. It's an earthquake, cried Mrs. Fox. Look, said one of the small foxes. Our tunnel's got shorter. I can see daylight. They all looked round, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now, and in the circle of daylight beyond they could see the huge 2 black tractors almost on top of them. Oh no, the tractors are caught up. Tractors, shouted Mr. Fox, and mechanical shovels. Dig for your lives, dig, dig, dig. Oh no, what's going to happen now? Chapter 6, The Race. Now there began a desperate race, the machines against the foxes. In the beginning, the hill looked like this. This is what the hill looked like, right? You can see. And then it will look like that. And after about an hour, as the machines bit away more and more soil from the hilltop, it looked like this. So it looked like over there, where Sue's pointing there, like that. Sometimes the foxes would gain a little ground and the clanking noises would grow fainter, and Mr. Fox would say, "We're going to make it. I'm sure we are." But then a few moments later, the machines would come back at them and the crunch of the mighty shovels would get louder and louder. Once the foxes actually saw the sharp metal edge of one of the shovels as it scraped up the earth just behind it. It was literally those shovels were catching up very quickly with the foxes. It's as if the foxes couldn't keep up. That's very worrying. "Keep going, my darlings," panted Mr. Fox. "Don't give up." "Keep going," the fat boggis shouted to Bunce and Bean. "We'll get him any moment now." "Have you caught sight of him yet?" Bean called back. "Not yet," shouted Boggis. "But I think you're close." "I'll pick him up with my bucket," shouted Bunce. "I'll chop him to pieces." But by lunchtime the machines were still at it, and so were the poor foxes. The hill now looked like this, so they were literally digging away to glory. You can see over here, really literally digging away to glory. Really, really bad. Oh, sorry, let's move the cursor ever so slightly. Thank you. The farmers didn't stop for lunch. They were too keen to finish the job. Imagine that, the greedy farmers, they gave up their food. "Hey there, Mr. Fox," said Bunce, leaning out of his tractor. "We're coming to get you now." "You've had your last chicken yet, Boggis. You'll never come prowling around my farm again." A sort of madness had taken over the three of them. The tall, skinny Bean and dwarfish pot-belly Bunce were driving the machines like maniacs, racing the motors and making the shovels dig at a terrific speed. The fat Boggis was hopping about like a dervish and shouting, "Faster, faster!" No. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, this is what had happened to the hill. So they literally dug right in, as you can see, right through over there. It's almost like a big crater. It was really, really worrying. Poor foxes. The hole the machines had dug was like the crater of a volcano. It was such an extraordinary sight that crowds of people came rushing out from the surrounding villages to have a look. They stood on the edge of the crater and stared down at Boggis, Bunce and Bean. Here, look, here it is. Can you see there? So they dug so deep. It's really, really deep. It's worrying, isn't it? "Hey there, Boggis, what's going on?" "We're after a fox." "You must be mad." The people jeered and laughed, but this only made the three farmers more furious and more obstinate. What obstinate means? It means when you're really, really, you want to do something, you're being stubborn really, and you're not going to listen to anyone, even if it's bad. You just want to get it. You want to get it done. That's what obstinate means. And more determined than ever not to give up until they had caught the fox. So they really were, they set their minds that they were going to get this fox, right? Chapter 7. We'll never let him go. At 6 o'clock, oh, thank you, Sue. Will you give a kiss now to the boys and girls? She's still shy. Still shy. All right. That's the story. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Bean switched off the motor of his tractor and climbed down from the driver's seat. Bunce did the same. Both men had enough. They were tired and stiff from driving the tractors all day. They were also hungry. Slowly, they walked over to the small fox's hole in the bottom of the huge crater. Bean's face was purple with rage. Bunce was cursing the fox with dirty words that cannot be printed. Boggis came waddling up. "Dang and blast that filthy, stinking fox," he said. "What the heck do we do now?" "I'll tell you what we don't do," Bean said. "We don't let him go." "We'll never let him go," Bunce declared. "Never, never, never." They're really being obstinate now. "Did you hear that, Mr. Fox?" yelled Bean, bending low and shouting down the hole. "It's not over yet, Mr. Fox. We're not going home till we've strung you up dead as a dingbat." Oh, I know. Shocking, isn't it? Language. Whereupon the three men all shook hands with one another and swore a solemn oath that they would not go back to their farms until the fox was caught. So they'd promised to each other that they will get this fox by hook or by crook. Will they get him? That's the question. "What's the next move?" asked Bunce, the pot-bellied dwarf. "We're sending you down the hole to fetch him up." "Oh," said Bean. "Down you go, you miserable midget." "Not me," screamed Bunce, running away. Bean made a sickly smile. When he smiled, you saw his scarlet gums. You saw more gums than teeth. It's awful. Can you imagine? Ugh. "Then there's only one thing to do," he said. "We starve him out. We camp here day and night, watching him and the hole. He'll come out in the end. He'll have to." So Boggis and Bunce and Bean sent messages down to the farms asking for tents, sleeping bags, and supper. So they were going to starve the family out. So cruel, so cruel. Chapter 8, the foxes begin to starve. That evening, 3 tents were put up in the crater on the hill. 1 for Boggis, 1 for Bunce, and 1 for Bean. The tents surrounded Mr. Fox's hole, and the 3 farmers sat outside their tents eating their supper. Boggis had 3 boiled chickens smothered in dumplings, Bunce had 6 doughnuts filled with disgusting goose liver paste, and Bean had 2 gallons of cider. All 3 of them kept their guns beside them. So you imagine how cruel that is, right? And they're there stuffing themselves to the gills with food and drink and that, and the foxes were gone hungry. They had no access to food at all. That's not nice, is it? Thank you, Sue. Oh, she's warming up. You want to give a kiss now? She's still shy. Still shy. I don't know what I'm going to do with her. Really don't. Boggis picked up a steaming chicken and held it close to the fox's hole. "Can you smell this, Mr. Fox?" he shouted. "Lovely tender chicken. Why don't you come up and get it?" Oh, that's so cruel, trying to tempt him. The rich scent of chicken wafted down the tunnel to where the foxes were crouching. "Oh, Dad," said one of the small foxes, "couldn't we just sneak up and snatch it out of his hand?" "Don't you dare," said Mrs. Fox. "That's just what they want you to do." "But we're so hungry," they cried. "How long will it be till we get something to eat?" The mother didn't answer them, nor did their father. There was no answer to give, was there, really? Poor family. As darkness fell, Bunce and Bean switched on the powerful headlamps of the 2 tractors and shone them to the hole. "Now," said Bean, "we'll take it in turn to keep watch. 1 watches while 2 sleep, and so on all through the night." Boggis said, "What if the fox digs a hole right through the hill and comes out on the other side? You didn't think of that one, did you?" "Of course I did," said Bean, pretending he had. He hadn't thought of it. He's not that bright after all, right? "Go on then, tell us the answer," said Boggis. Bean picked up something small and black out of his ear and flicked it away. I don't want to know what that was. I really don't want to know what that was. It's disgusting. "How many men have you got working on your farm?" he asked. 35, Boggis said. "I've got 36, Bunce said. "And I've got 37, Bean said. "That makes 108 men altogether." Oh, he's good at maths, isn't he? "We must order them to surround the hill. Each man will have a gun and a flashlight. There'll be no escape for Mr. Fox." Oh. So the order went down to the farms, and that night 108 men formed a tight ring round the bottom of the hill. So literally, if you can imagine the hole that they dug in the crater, so they had basically all 3 farms worth of men surrounded by that crater, so that if the fox family were to kind of pop up, they'll be caught. They had them surrounded and they're starving. It's not nice, is it? No. The next day, the watching and waiting went on. Boggis and Bunce and Bean sat upon small stools staring at the fox's hole. They didn't talk much. They just sat there with their guns on their laps. Every so often Mr. Fox would creep a little closer towards the mouth of the tunnel and take a sniff. Then he would creep back again and say, "They're still there." Because remember, foxes can smell humans out. So he was able to smell and tell whether they were there or not. And they were there, of course. They weren't going to leave, were they? They'd promised they wouldn't. "Are you quite sure?" Mrs. Fox would ask. "Positive," said Mr. Fox. "I can smell that man Bean a mile away. He stinks." We know that, don't we? Chapter 9. Mr. Fox has a plan. For 3 days and 3 nights this waiting game went on. "How long can a fox go without food or water?" Boggis asked on the 3rd day. "Not much longer now," Bean told him. "He'll make a run for it soon." "He'll have to." Bean was right. Down in the tunnel, the foxes were slowly but surely starving to death. "If only we'd had to have just a tiny sip of water," said one of the small foxes. "Oh, Dad, can't you do something?" Poor things. "Couldn't we make a dash for it, Dad? We'd have a little bit of a chance, wouldn't we?" "No chance at all," snapped Mrs. Fox. "I refuse to let you go up there and face those guns. I'd sooner you stay down here and die in peace." What an awful, awful choice to have to face as a child. Do you stay in the hole and die in peace, and starve to death, or do you go up and get shot and killed? It's just awful. Mr. Fox had not spoken for a long time. He had been sitting quite still, his eyes closed, not even hearing what the others were saying. Mrs. Fox knew that he was trying to desperately think of a way out. And now as she looked at him, she saw him stir himself and get slowly to his feet, because remember, they were all hungry and feeling weak. He looked back at his wife. There was a little spark of excitement dancing in his eyes. "What is it, darling?" said Mrs. Fox quickly. "I've just had a bit of an idea," Mr. Fox said carefully. "What?" they cried. "Oh, Dad, what is it?" "Come on," said Mrs. Fox. "Tell us quickly." "Well," said Mr. Fox. Then he stopped and sighed and sadly shook his head. He sat down again. "Oh, it's no good," he said. "It won't work after all." "Why not, Dad?" "Because it means more digging, and we aren't any... Well, they're not any fitter now, are they? We're strong enough for that after 3 days and nights without food." "Yes, we are, Dad," cried the small foxes, jumping up and running to their father. "We can do it. You see if we can't. So can you." Mr. Fox looked at the 4 small foxes and he smiled. "What fine children I have," he thought. "They're starving to death and they haven't had a drink for 3 days, but they're still undefeated. I mustn't let them down." "I suppose we could give it a try," he said. "Let's go, Dad. Tell us what you want us to do." Slowly, Mrs. Fox got up to her feet. She was suffering more than any of them from the lack of food and water. Oh, dear. She was very weak. "I'm so sorry," she said, "but I don't think I'm going to be much help." "You stay right where you are, my darling," said Mr. Fox. "We can handle this by ourselves." So we're going to close this video now because we're up to chapter 10 and see us in the next part, won't you? Let's see what happens to the rest of the story. Do the foxes win or do the farmers? We'll find out in the next video. See you in a bit. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.